Hello and welcome back once again. Here we are. Going to have another look at some mods and see what we can do with these. I was asked in a comment to have a look at these. Apologies, I've been really busy and had other videos to do and whatever else, but finally get to what I need to do. So, modules, stockage, placeable, 1.3 FS17. Pretty good sort of layout, I think, actually. I was asked actually another question about how to go about or how to set up a 3-bay storage barn, whatever you want to call it, similar to what we had in FarmSim 15, where you had your storage for sugar beets, potatoes, things like that, in the kind of like pole barns, you know, the similar to this kind of layout, but it was more a solid barn with, you know, various different storages in it. I tried to actually recreate that by using the in-game setup, the same sort of silo bunker setup or silo system where you put your grain and whatever else, but due to the way that it's been set up in FarmSim 17, it uses a radius to identify the actual inputs and outputs. So you have a silo trigger in, and then within a certain radius you have an output trigger, and that is then they're kind of joined together, if you like, by that radius. And however I tried to do it, even when I separated them by sort of 5-6 bays, if you like, it would either the radius, irregardless of what I changed the number to in the map01.xml, it either wouldn't pick up the one that was right in front of it, or it picked up both, which was not a major problem. But if you, for example, put potatoes in this one and sugar beets in one down there, you could get your potatoes or sugar beets out of either of them, irregardless of what fill type you actually put in the inbox, which was obviously for me not really appropriate, because, you know, I wanted this one to be separate. So for example, this one would be potatoes, this one would be sugar beets, so you would get potatoes only from this one and only sugar beets from that one. And I couldn't find a workaround without moving the triggers massively, you know, a big distance between the two of them. It would pick up, like I say, both of them. And then also the downside of that, if I use the user attribute is farm silo, so that it showed up in the escape menu for your fill levels, because it was picking up, because the way that it works was actually identifying both inputs. If I put potatoes into this one, it would see the potatoes in that one as well. So if you had, say, 10,000 potatoes in this one and none in that one, because that one was designated for sugar beets, when you'd look in the escape menu, you'd actually show up that you had 20,000 potatoes and not 10, which is all you really actually had. It got really sort of out of whack somewhere. I like the idea of what they've tried to do there with that setup, but it doesn't work. In my opinion, it really doesn't work. They should have stuck with what we had in FarmSim 15. You could have a much better layout of your silos. There are advantages for, you know, bigger maps. If you go for 4 times and 16 times maps, multiplayer scenarios, it does allow you to have separate storages around the map that only that person who's farming that area of the map can access. It's not accessible by every other silo on the map. So that's an advantage, but as far as I can tell, it's the only advantage. Everything else is broken, and again, that's just my opinion on that. But as this was brought to my attention, I figured I would try and do one video but achieve 2 things in one video. So to show the person who asked me, and I apologise, I can't remember who you were, so bad with names, show you how to get these into a map through Giants Editor. These work on the Fabrik script, which is again a really good script, and you can, you know, it will only take out what you put in, because it works, you know, slightly differently. But and then also try and fulfill the other question I was asked by how to make a well, I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to take a 3-bay storage. I'm actually going to do it a little bit different. I'm going to possibly take it maybe a 4 I think in total there's 11 of these particular storage bays, so I believe I'm going to have 10 bays, and then what I'll do is have one of these on its own, just to show you, the differences and what you can do with it and everything else. So anyway, we'll get into this. I just want to go through this. So this is the placeable version, obviously. So purchase storage for beets, potatoes, grass, silage, cuttings. No idea. No idea what that is either. Chips, storage, pig feed, mixed feed, seeds, and it comes with conveyor belts. I would imagine that's some sort of language translation foobar there. I don't know what that is, but we'll get into what it actually does when we start looking at the mods and everything else, and then stripping them down and getting them into the map through Giant Serta. So we'll move on from there. Okay, I'll put a link in the description to this particular page, or a page that you can get it from. So yeah, I'm just going to show you what I've got here. So I've downloaded it, and this is what you get. This is the actual folder. I've unzipped it already. Stockage placeable FS17. So you have chaff, forage mix, grass, pig food, potatoes, seeds, silage, straw, sugar beet, and wood chips. So that's the actual the mods themselves there. I've already gone ahead and put them over into the map that I'm going to be using today. So I've put them in a particular arrangement here, and I've just copied over the i3Ds and all the bits and pieces into the map. So it's pretty straightforward how to do that. I've got loads of videos on how to put stuff into your map folder structure and whatever else. So yeah, just bring the folder over or whatever into a folder that you're going to create in your map, bring it over, and then just import them from there. So we also need to update our mod desk to incorporate these new items. Now this particular map, I've already got scripts on it, so this, as I said, uses the Fabrik script, and it also uses the additional triggers Lua, but that's the only two scripts that it needs. I've already got those on this particular map, but if you don't, then you will need to copy those over into whatever folder you want to designate as your scripts folder. But like I said, I've already got my versions there, so that's fine. And then what we'll do is we'll go into the mod desk here. So if I bring up that one, and I'll bring up the mod desk for the actual mod pack itself, and we'll take the parts what we need from here. So obviously, if you haven't got your scripts, your additional or extra source files, then you would need to take these from here. If you haven't got any at all on the map you're working with, then you would need to include the tags as well. Otherwise, you just need to copy these lines over and then change the path file name again, as I say, to wherever you have whichever folder you've designated as your scripts folder. So for me, some of these parts might actually double up because I've already got some parts on the map I'm using that use the Fabrik script. So we'll try and identify what I need and what I don't need, and then go from there. So what I'll do is I'm just going to drag that over so I can see them side by side here, so I can identify what I have got and what I haven't got. So let's have a look. Additional trigger help box, info auto manual. So I've already got those, so don't need those. So we'll take that one, that one, that one, and I'll take that one, but I'll copy that separately. So let's copy those over. So I'll bring those down to here. That'll be fine. We'll create a couple of lines, paste them in. I'll just tidy these up a little bit so they all line up. Like so. If you do actually copy over more than you need, it won't actually stop the program from running or whatever else. What it will do though is it will just create an error in your log text saying that there's duplications. In actual fact, I've already got them because I can see straight away here that I've actually got these already in here. MS, silage, straw, grass and forage. So I can actually remove those ones, the silage, straw, grass, forage, because they are used by the mix master, the mixing station, so I actually don't need those ones. So just what I would probably say is to copy them all over and then go through your list and find any duplicates and remove those duplicates so you don't get the error. Like I said, it won't actually stop the mod from working, it will just give you an error to say that it's already been recognized, and it will then just ignore it. It won't register it twice, if you know what I mean. Okay, so we've got that part. So I've got, if I come back up here, let's have a look. What have we got here? Somewhere in here. There we go. So I've got product. I've got that one. I've got the error. I've got the layer. So yeah, I've actually got most of those. But if you don't have any of these, then you would obviously need to copy all of those over. If you're working with a mod map that you're just creating or whatever else, you may not have the L10N tags. So then again, you would need to copy the entire section, including the tags as well. The store items we won't need. We won't require those because we're not going to be using these as placeables. This part here is only for the placeable side of things, which points to the XMLs so that it knows what height to place it, and all the rest of it. So we won't need any of those. So we're pretty much done there. Don't need any of the stuff up here to do with the store item, the actual DDS files, because this again is just the icon file that will be displayed when you start the game and you have your list of mods where you put your ticks in. That will be the icon that will display next to it to represent the mod that you're actually activating or deactivating or whatever else. Multiplayer true, I've already got that in my mod disk anyway, so don't need any of that. So we can close that down. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Pretty straightforward there. Don't need this anymore because as I say, I've already copied over everything from here. So if we open up the map in Giants Editor here, we'll take a look at these particular mods. As I say, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to import one on its own. I'm not entirely sure which one it's going to be yet. Probably seeds, if I'm honest. And I'll keep all the others within the area that I'm actually going to be placing them down to the map itself. But we'll have a bit of a play around, see what we can come up with here. So, right, let's go over to here where I've set the area up. So I've actually exported these particular items from FarmSim 15 and map from FarmSim 15, and they're just pole barns. They're actually two, if you can see that. It's just two bays, and all I've done is just join them together to make a much larger sort of setup here. And we have like the slots in the back for the conveyor belts, so I'm hoping that they'll be the right size for the conveyor belts that come with this particular mod. We'll make a couple of adjustments to the ground area here so that the conveyor belts all fit in the right place and everything else, and you know, look like they're meant to be there and whatever else. And then what I will also do here is I'm going to bring in, as I say, just the one separate mod on its own down here. So we'll do the one to start with. I'm not sure, I might go into game and test that first. Just dog, sorry about that. Might just go into game so we can test it, so you can see what it looks like, and if you're happy with that point, you can then, you know, stop watching if you want to, so you can work out, you know, from the one that we're going to add in now, the rest of them will be identical to how I go about doing that. So if you think, right, I know exactly what I'm doing now, move on, then you can stop and go and do it. If you're curious on how I actually then split the mod up and build it into these particular settings, you know, these pole barns here, then stick around and we'll see what we can do with that as well. So I'm going to create a new transform group because I want to keep these in one particular area, and I'm going to rename this into Fabrik storage. Hit the tab key so it locks it in, and I'm going to go file, import. I'm going to go into my models folder, and I've obviously got them all in here. So what we'll do is we'll work with the seed storage one, I think, first of all. So I'm going to bring that in, and then obviously it puts it at the bottom of the cinemagraph. So I need to go Control X with it highlighted to cut it, and then I need to click my new transform group, Control V to paste it into there like so. Again with it highlighted, Control B, and then I'm going to click on the map. You could also do the edit interactive placement, and it will do exactly the same thing as the Control B shortcut does. Okay, so I want to rotate this, so let's go -90. No, I want it the other way around, so let's go 90. There we go, that's better. So we'll bring it over to here somewhere like this. That'll be fine for the video anyway. Might want to place it somewhere a little bit better than this, but not really that fussed. I may even take this particular little shed out here. It's not really that important, but for the video it's not going to be relevant. But if I was building it into this area, probably would take that little shed out and maybe even those trees, I don't know, and then integrate it into there somewhat. But again, as I say, for the video this will be perfectly fine. Okay, so we've got that into there, no problem. Again, we can look through this quickly. So we've got our inputs. It's always worth, with the user attributes window open, it's always worth just having a look in here and actually see what they do take, you know, the actual fill type itself. Because we do have, with the additional map type script, seeds 2, so you could find that this may be set up as seeds 2, but luckily it's not. It's actually set up as seeds, which are a designated fill type within FarmSim 17, which they weren't in FarmSim 15. So you can actually pick them up in a trailer, as well as your seeder now in FarmSim 17, which you needed the actual Seeds 2 mod to do in FarmSim 15. We don't need to do that anymore because we have that now integrated into the game, which is great. So we have our fill type of seeds, so that's fantastic. So you can buy your pallets from the in-game store and then put them into a trailer and then put them into here. So if you were to perhaps maybe have too many, you could then also always come over to here, tip them into here, and then not have a trailer sat around somewhere with, you know, half full of seeds that you can't use or whatever else. So here we are in game, and I've just got a tractor trailer and a few seeds. All I've done is bought the pallets that you can get in game, so I'll show you that. If we go into the pallets, I've just bought the seed big bags and then literally just filled the trailer up from those. Really nice feature. So if we come round, I'll bring up the F1 menu and we have our player trigger. So again, as I showed in GE, where that's positioned. If we walk into here, it gives us our information. Seeds in, seeds out. Really straightforward, nothing too fancy there. So if we actually then come back round here and get into the tractor here, we'll start this up. I'll just turn that off. So if we come round now, we come into our marked area here, we get our tip trigger, I to unload, and as you can see, the actual seeds are then coming up through the ground. I don't know why, but a lot of these textures now, they seem to be really weird when they get into game. They're not when they're see, that's not too bad there. I think it must have something to do with shaders or something like that, but because it's gone black again now, look, I'm not sure on that. I think it has something to do with the normal texture. I did read somewhere on one of the forums that there is a problem with the normal texture within some of these within FarmSim 17, and it does freak out a little bit sometimes. So just be aware of that. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but I've come across it more and more, even when I've changed the actual textures myself to something else. It then gives me this black texture as I move around, and I'm sure it's got something to do with the normal texture, but I wouldn't like to say 100% if that's accurate or not, but just be aware of that. There is a glitch there somewhere, but how to fix it, I'm not sure. Anyway, so we'll come around now and we'll come under the conveyor belt. I'll bring up the F1 menu so you can just see what it actually does show up in here. So we have our different information come up, and it will then say to us so R to start, which is R to start filling. And if I actually get out, because it tells me to, if we read a little bit further down, it says info, get out to set automatic filling, and we're actually on manual filling at the moment. So if I actually get out and then come into the trigger here, if I can actually get into the trigger, there we go. So it says R automatic filling. If I press R, it will change to manual filling, but the actual setting is automatic filling. So it's probably filled up actually because I'm under the trigger. I don't know if it will. Yeah, it has, because I changed it to automatic. So what I'll do is I'll just come back round again and we will empty this out again, and I'll then show you the manual filling. So we'll just empty this out again. There we go. And we'll then just come back under the trigger again. Because I'm on manual filling now, I want to show you the actual conveyor belt working, which I couldn't show you before. So we'll come under here, we'll press R, and you can see the seeds coming up the conveyor belt and then into the actual trailer. So all working perfectly fine, textures working fine and everything else. The only textures that are a little bit weird, again, I don't know what the fix is for that, normal map textures or whatever else, but it does work. It's just a little bit weird depending on what direction you're looking at it. No idea. Like I say, I've come across it more and more and more, irregardless of what format I save it in, what size or anything else. I find that that's something that seems to be happening more and more. So anyway, there we go. If you want to stop watching now, by all means do so. It's in the map, it's working. You can use exactly the same procedure as I have up till now to import the others. If you just want to keep them as standard like this, just bring them into map. Make sure you bring all the objects, the text objects, over into your mod desk. Make sure you've got the Fabrik script and the additional trigger script where it needs to be, and you've got your path file names set up and everything else. You should have absolutely no problems whatsoever. Just bring the mods into your map, import them into your map through Giants Editor, place them where you want to put them, come into game, and you should have no issues whatsoever. So right, what I'm going to do now that we know that that one's working and everything else, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I'll come back out to the desktop, and then what we'll do is we'll have a bit more of a play around and see if we can break down this particular mod and integrate it into these pole barn sheds that I've imported over from a map from 15. So we'll get back on the desktop and then we'll have a play around with that. So we've come back in a GE here, and what I want to do now is obviously bring in the other parts and then work with those and manipulate them to integrate them into this particular setup here, if I can do that. So I'm going to go into File, Import, and then I'll go back to my models folder where I've got them all. We've done the seeds one, so we'll do the chaff, that's fine. I'm not really bothered what order they're in, to be honest with you. I don't care if silage is next to potatoes or whatever else. You may be a bit more fussy than that. I'm not, so I'm just going to bring them in as they're listed here. We'll just obviously skip the seeds one because we've just brought that in as a separate item, because there are actually 11 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and I've only got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 bays because these are 2-bay sheds. So it made sense to bring in just that one on its own, which I'm perfectly happy with. So we'll do the chaff one, so we'll import this into the map. Going to highlight it, Control X to cut it, and I will then put it into my Fabrik storage transform group. And then what I'll do is I'll just bring it over to the map here, so we have it all over here. So we'll go Control B and bring it over. Perfect. So now what I want to do is rotate it. So my rotate Y, I'm going to go 180 degrees because I want everything facing the right direction. So I'm just going to bring that over like so. And like I said before, this is where you can break down the mod, because there are just visible objects attached to a Fabrik script arrangement. So what we can do is open this one up, and if we actually then click on the chaff transform group, this is just the building and the platform. So all I can do there is just hit the delete key and it takes it away. Now what I can do is move these individual objects into place to integrate them into this shed. We will probably need to move them separately to get it to position correctly, but for the time being I'm going to move the entire section. So with the whole cube selected, which highlights everything, the triggers, the whole lot, I'm just going to move it around into a position that's comfortable where I want it to be. So we'll do that, and we'll try and align it as best we can up with the hole in the back of the shed here, like so. It's not absolutely necessary that you attach this to the building, so you can just leave it as it is. That's what I'm going to do anyway. It's attached to a building to start with, at least, because it's originally starts off as a placeable mod, so it needs to be attached to that building as a placeable to make it all function and show up in the game correctly. But as we're bringing it into the map through Giants Editor, that's not as overly important. So just shift that across a little bit more so it's somewhat centralized. Not too bothered for the video itself. You can, if you're still with me, you can move it around however you want to and position it a little bit better for your map. So we'll just bring this up a tad so the conveyor belt's not digging in the ground, it's sort of just above. What I will actually do here, I think, is I'm going to lower the terrain slightly in this area, So to do that, I'm going to close down that user attributes window, and we'll go into terrain editing. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to choose my terrain sculpt mode, smallish style brush, and I'm just going to right click in this area, if it will let me. Come on, mouse, work. There we go. So it lowers it down in that area, because these sheds are designed to have a dip in them for the conveyor belts, which is why I chose them. Really good sheds. So just double check on the outside of the pole barn shed, whatever you want to call it, that I haven't sunk the ground out here anywhere. So you do need to be a little bit careful when you're lowering the ground texture, or the ground height there, that you're not making big divots in the ground, all around the building and whatever else. Again, sorry for the zooming in and out and whatever else. I need to buy a new mouse. This one's completely shot. Too much GE stuff. The buttons are packing up and everything now, but my mouse mat's not that great either, to be fair, but it's a really good mouse, or it has been a really good mouse. I forget, it's a Corsair, I think, but it's starting to get a bit worn out now. Right, so we'll just lower that down into that dip there, so it looks again like it's meant to be there and it belongs. So we'll just bring that in. I think that looks pretty good, actually. Not too bad, not too bad at all. It's not clipping into the building anywhere there, I don't think. Nope. And whatever else, it's at the right height. I don't think anything's floating out here anywhere that I can see. Again, we may be able to, maybe a little bit. Let's bring it down a little bit more. There we go. That'll be better. Yeah, that's not too bad. That'll be fine again for the video. You may need to adjust the terrain height and whatever else to work for you. Again, not so much for the video, but yeah, that's not too bad. That'll be fine. We'll go with that. Okay, so now obviously what I need to do is move some of these triggers around a little bit, because they're now positioned somewhat incorrectly for the shed that I'm attaching them to. So too bad actually. They're not too bad actually. I don't know. I might just move them in a tad. So what we'll do here is we'll close that down. So just going to go into here. So we'll go to our transform, which is our markers. You want to move these first because you can see those, whereas the actual triggers you can't see. So trying to align the markers to a invisible trigger is much harder than aligning a visible trigger once you click on it to the markers. So move your markers first. So we'll just move those in just a little bit. Like so. Don't want them too floaty, so because if you remember with the original one, if we go over to this one, it's on a raised platform, whereas this is now being it's just on the terrain height. Now again, you could increase the terrain height if you wanted to, but that make it a little bit awkward then to get in with your wheel load or whatever else. So it's just easier to lower the actual markers down to meet the terrain height as it is. Okay, so now we've got that into position there like so. What I can do now is move my input triggers. So I'll move those to actually match the marker as best I can again. So doesn't really matter, as long as what you don't want is when the heap is up massively high, once you get this filled up, that it doesn't start sticking out the back of the building. So you need to have a bit of a play around with that. So we'll do output trigger. That one's not too bad actually. Yeah, that's not too bad. What you can do here is to actually go into the trigger itself, the individual triggers, and if you actually click on the plane, take a note of your translate Y, so we'll make a copy of that. What I'll do is I'll increase it to its maximum point, and we'll see what it looks like, making sure that it's not clipping through any of the areas of the building, which it's not, so that's fantastic. So we can then paste in our number we had before just to bring it back down again. We can go to our output trigger and click on our heap, and we can do the same again there. So we'll make a copy of that and we'll bring it up. If I can actually click on the right part, so we'll bring it up, make sure it looks like it's in the right place. I'm not too fussed with that. I think that looks actually pretty good, that it's just poking out of the building a little bit. You may disagree, but I quite like the idea of that actually, so I'm going to leave that as it is. So when it's completely full up, it's kind of overflowing out of the shed here just a little bit. I think that looks quite nice, so we'll paste that number back in again so it brings it back down. Perfect. Okay, so what we need to do now though is we need to set up, make sure our tip trigger and our shovel trigger is in the right place. So we've got our tip trigger, solo trigger, heap, shovel trigger. Yeah, that's fine because it's attached to the heap, so that's all good there. Excellent. So that's all fine. So what we need to do now though is actually have a play around with the actual settings. So we'll bring up our user attributes window again, because in here we have a move min max y for the actual heap, whether it be the input plane or the output plane. So if we click on our tip trigger there, we have a move max y, move min y, and what that refers to is the plane itself, the heap that you can see, the chaff heap. But we want to move the plane as a whole, because if we actually look at the user attributes again, you can see that the actual move index is 3, and if we click on the plane and have a look over in our attributes window, it ends with a 3. So if you move the chaff heap separately, that ends in a 0, it won't be applied. It must be the transform group called a plane that you're adjusting. What we want to do here is just move this down slightly, so it's just poking through the ground, so we need to adjust both of these a little bit. I tend to have it so it's just literally poking through the ground, so at a glance you can come past and have a look and go, oh yeah, grass grows in that one, or whatever else you want to do. You can also put banners up and plaques and whatever else. Take the ones from the actual building. I don't know if these are separate or not. We'll just have a quick look. Has this actually got a text one on it? No, it hasn't. Hasn't got anything written on them. I think the ones in 15, they actually had chaff and seeds and whatever else written on them. But I'm sure you can probably find some and then attach them to the building that you're applying it to, if you choose to do that, or just, as I say, have the heap sticking through slightly, as long as they're different textures. Obviously if this texture is used again for something like chaff, then it's not really going to be, oh, this is chaff anyway, sorry. If this texture is used again for grass, then it's not really going to be of much use visually, but you'll be able to look at that passing by perhaps. I don't know, whatever works. So what we need to do now though is take that number, the translate y number, and we need to overwrite our user attributes to match. So for the input, I'm going to take that number there, minus 4.043. I'm going to copy that and make sure you highlight all of it, because if you double click, it will actually not highlight the minus, the negative. So you need to make sure you drag across with your left mouse button pressed and highlight the entire number, including any parts that go with that. And then what we do is go back to tip trigger. This is obviously our minimum, so we want move min y, so we need to overwrite that one with that number, not that number. There's me saying do this, do that, and then I don't do it. So we'll copy that, we'll go back into here and we'll overwrite that. There we go, perfect. And then what we'll do is we'll go back to our plane, and we want to move this up to its highest point that we want it to be at. So if you don't want it to, you know, you can have it wherever you want. It's your choice. I wouldn't recommend you have it up here because that looks silly, but you know, you can have it up to a point wherever you want it to be, and that's as high as the heap will go. So I'm going to go up to here. I'm going to take the translate y again with Control C. I'm going to copy that, come back into my tip trigger, then my move max y. I'm going to highlight all of that, paste it in. Perfect. And then tab across to lock that in. If you want to just double check that that's working as it's intended to, so you can then say take your move min y from here, so you can take that number and copy it, go back to your plane, paste that into the translate y, and it will go back down again. So that's that one done. Then we need to go to our heap. Now this one here is set up a little bit different because the actual attribute is, or user attribute is actually part and parcel of that cube. It's not in any of the other parts, it's part of that cube itself. So we can actually change everything within here. So again, what I can do is, this is the minimum that I want it to be at, and this is move min max y, so min to max. So I can take this translate y, copy that, come into here and just overwrite this first set of numbers here, like so, tab across, lock it in. Then I can move the heap up again, as I say, to where I want it to be, which I think is going to be about there somewhere, and we will then copy that with Control C, come in and overwrite that one with Control V, tab across, lock it in. And obviously, you know, depending on where you're putting your tip triggers and everything else, and if you're going to be integrating course play into stuff like this, then you want to make sure that your heap, because this will be a collidable object, I believe. Let's have a look. It might not actually be a collidable object. I don't know if it is or not. Yes, it is. I believe that is a collidable object. So there's a possibility that if you were to have the heap too far out into the tip trigger, and you were then using course play to bring that particular product into here, you may find that your original course play course, as the pile gets bigger and bigger, it would then interrupt your course play course. It would cause a problem because your tractor would then, or whatever you're using on your course play course to tip off the chaff or whatever it might be, would then hit the pile, because as it gets bigger and bigger, it's going to then interfere with your tip trigger. So just be aware of that as well. Make sure that the heap doesn't get too much into your tip trigger and then cause you problems later on, possibly with course play or whatever else. Okay, so now what I can do is I can take my minimum, my setting I've put in here, copy that, come back over to translate y, paste that in, puts the pile back down to its lowest point. Perfect. So we're pretty much done with that one. Okay, so we're in game again, and I've added all the other Fabrik bunkers, storage areas, whatever you want to call these, to the barn silos, whatever these are. I forget what they're called now. Pole barns, that's it. That's the word I was thinking of. So yeah, I've added all those in now and made all the appropriate adjustments and all the rest of it. So we can actually bring up the F1 menu here, and each one we go into hitting the player trigger, it tells us. So this one has got silage in it. This one is forage mixing. This one is TMR forage. Then we've got chaff in this one. There's seeds in that one. And then I believe this one's grass. Yeah, so we've got grass. Now this one actually says grass, dry grass, because it uses the same index as the mix station, which also takes hay or dry grass. But this actually only has a fill type of grass, so the text you can ignore on that side of things if you're using the mix station, the big blue mix station. But so yeah, this one is straw. This one is pig food. Then we have our wood chips. And if we come over to this one, we have our sugar beet and potatoes. Perfect. Now, the actual textures which I showed earlier on for the seeds, where they go black, and I mentioned that I had read somewhere that there was a problem with the normal texture. What I actually did was, in the Giants Editor session, I went into the material editing window and I removed the link to both the normal and specular textures. I didn't remove the textures themselves, I just removed the link for each of the fill planes to the normal and specular DDS files, and that seems to have rectified the problem. I don't have that black texture anymore coming up. It shows the correct texture, so you can actually see this is sugar beets and not just a black file, which is what was happening before with the seeds. And I did do that after I had added all of these in, so I added them all in, went into game, and they were all turning black basically and giving me a really funky sort of look to them. They were, I wouldn't know this was chaff. It was just a black pile, a flickering black pile. So by removing both the links to the normal and specular channels in the material editing window for each of the planes, that seems to have rectified it. And I'll show you the seeds one as well, which was the worst one or the one that I showed right at the beginning when we added this one in, the seeds now show up perfectly fine as well. So there must be at least some truth to what that forum was saying about the textures having a bit of an issue in Farm Sim 17. Don't know, but that seems to have fixed the problem for me. Also, what I'll do is I'll drive the tractor over there, because we'll try the potatoes and the sugar beets, and then we'll end the video there, I think. But and hopefully this gives you a little bit of sort of, you know, a bit of a play around, add some storage, nice storage areas. The tip on ground function in this game is fantastic. It's got some really great features to it, but it's broken. I'm not going to lie, it's broken. It doesn't work properly. It never has, and they still haven't fixed it, in my opinion. Even now, you know, you've still got material coming through the walls, even though you've put all your tip blockers in and everything else. Still comes through the walls. You have a small tipper trailer, a smaller one than this, and you tip it onto the ground, and it looks like you know, a massive great pile. Looks like you've got 500,000 litres of whatever product on the ground, when in actual fact you've only got 1,000 litres. And grass, don't get me started on grass heaps. I think, you know, it is a great feature, it just needs to be fixed. So this, I think, will, for me, this is the way I'm always going to go now, that the person who pointed me towards this, thank you very much, because I was looking for something like this, but I just tried to do it by using the in-game silo trigger setup, and as I said before in the video, I just couldn't get it to work properly. So for me, this is fantastic, because it's now going to allow me to have a good old-fashioned sort of setup without having to use the tip on ground function and having stuff bleeding through the walls. You know, it doesn't necessarily need to be silage coming through the you know, the silage clamps, through the walls of the silage clamps. You know, you would tip your potatoes or sugar beets into a building that was specifically set up to have, you know, tip collisions, yet you'd come around the back of the building like this and they're all poking through, and then you can't get access to them because they're now part of the tip collision and you can't pick them back up again. To me, that is broken. I don't know about you guys, but to me that's broken. But this, I think, is going to be fantastic. So, you know, really appreciate you bringing this to my attention. Thank you very much. So yeah, what we'll do, I don't know if I said that I fixed the potato. I'm getting a bit lost now. I've fixed the potatoes as well, if I haven't already said this. If I have, I apologise for repeating myself. The potato texture that was part of the actual mod, I believe, was from Farm Sim 15. The textures weren't correct for what Farm Sim 17 needs to see. So what I did, I actually took the textures direct from the Farm Sim 17 folder on my hard drive. The actual you know, what you download, the game itself, went into the folder there, into the data folder, found the appropriate texture file for the fill planes, and then literally overwrote the ones that come with the mod and fixed. Now we have a proper texture for potatoes and not some grainy looking whatever that was before. So anyway, what we'll do now is we'll just go around the back of here, and I will jump out before I get under the trigger, and I'll bring up my F1 menu, and if we come into the trigger here, again, like the seeds I showed earlier, we have the function to change this from automatic filling to manual filling. So at the moment it's on manual filling because it says actual settings at the bottom of the F1 menu there, actual settings manual filling. At the top of the F1 menu there it says press R to change to automatic filling, so we do that and the actual settings then change, and we can have whichever way we want. So again, manual filling, you drive under and you have to press the R key to fill your trailer or whatever up. If you change it to automatic, you just drive your trailer under it and it will fill it up automatically. I like the manual function simply because if you were to accidentally get a little bit too close to the tip trigger, because you can't see the tip trigger, so you know, might want to put some markers down underneath the tip trigger in GE just so you can actually, you know, get a better reference of where they are. But you know, you're driving under a conveyor belt, so for me this is okay. I'm not too bothered. The actual markers, these markers, they're okay, but I think, you know, they just they can get, on some maps I've seen so many of them, they're on every single gate that you go through, they're on everywhere, all over the map, and and in a lot of cases you can't actually turn them off if they've not been set up properly. You can't turn them off, you can't deactivate them. So normally you can go into, if they've been set up properly, you can go into here and you interactive zone markers, you can turn them off. If they haven't been set up properly, you can't. And to be honest with you, I don't actually know if these are like that. They're not. They haven't been set up in the mod itself. Because it's a placeable, it's not going to be affected by this function in the game itself. So I may add those user attributes so that I can actually deactivate those if I so choose to. But yeah, they are a nice added feature, so it gives you the benefit of knowing where you're going to be tipping on it. But I think sometimes they can get a little bit too much. There's just too many of them, again, in my opinion. So anyway, like I was saying, I like the manual function so that you can't accidentally just come under here and start filling up with potatoes when you actually really want your sugar beets. I think this may cause problems with things like courseplay. If you're using courseplay to obviously get a product to go and sell, then you would obviously want to change it to the automatic filling function, and then just set your course up appropriately so that it goes to that specific conveyor belt or tip point or whatever else, or silo trigger or whatever. But for me, when I'm doing things, I only generally use courseplay to do stuff on fields. The actual driving around the farm or whatever else I tend to do myself, especially if it's a farm like this or whatever else, because it looks so great. You know, just I think Thornton Farm and all the others, they look fantastic, and I just find that driving around and getting courseplay to do absolutely everything is not my style. Perhaps maybe 4 times 16 times maps, then it's a little bit different because you could take a week to get across the map. But for your standard size maps, I like to drive around them. Anyway, I'm bambling. So we'll press R here and we'll get our potatoes out. As you can see, it's all coming out the conveyor belt and everything else. So we'll just do that and we'll stop and we'll just go and tip these back in again. So if I actually then come into here and we'll jump back out again, because I just want to show you this. We'll jump back out, bring up the F1 menu. You can see down the bottom there it says info potato empty, but if I actually then tip these in, so we'll get into the tip trigger, we'll tip this in, and obviously the information window only comes up if you're out of the vehicle. You don't get the information window unless you're out of the vehicle. So we'll jump out of the vehicle, go back into the box, and it still says empty, but even though I've put some in, but it does register them. If you look at the input products, it shows that I've put 7,701 in there, but they're not being registered yet. But if I actually speed up time a little bit, we'll then see that it will actually kick in, and we will then, that info potato empty disappears, and it then takes them. So they go in really quickly once it kicks in. And that's been set up by the user attributes, that they just go in, bam, in one big lump. But it takes a little while. That's just part of the Fabrik script. On every product that's created on the Fabrik script, it takes a little while for the script to kick in and do its thing. But again, that's no biggie. I think that's quite a good thing. If you're going to put them into storage, why would you want to literally take them straight back out again then? Unless it's done by error and they just speed up time a little bit and you can get to them quite easily. So just do the sugar beets or something. Actually we'll do this one over here because it happens to be right in front of my tractor. So we'll just go over to this one. I don't know what this one is. Pig food maybe, might be silage, I don't know, can't remember. So we'll come over to here, we'll hit the trigger and we'll get something out of there. Not sure what that is. Silage, I believe. So we'll do that and we'll just go around and we'll tip it back in again. I won't do all of them, just to show you what they do work, and you'll get in the product that you're putting into it and the rest of it, and nothing more. So there we go, and back in. So yeah, there we go. I would say just have a bit of a play around with those textures, the actual links, in the material editing window in Giant Editor. Open that up, click on your plane, and if you haven't clicked on the right part, it won't show in the material editing window. But choose the right part of the plane, the fill plane for these bits here, and then in the material editing window you'll have a diffuse, normal and specular channel. Literally just on the normal and specular, click the red X to delete the link to those DDS files for each one of them, input and output, and then just save it. And if at the end of the day, if you haven't got or been having the same problem with the piles turning that black, horrible black colour and glitching out and all the rest of it, then you know, don't worry about it, move on. But if you have, then that may be a fix. It certainly worked for me in this case, so I don't know why it was doing that, why it does it, no idea. But it is, and that seems to have sorted that out for me. So anyway, there we go. Hopefully I've satisfied everybody's questions there and all the rest of it. You know, how to work with these storage facilities in the original format, and how to integrate it into different barns, sheds, whatever, and also possibly how to set up different types of barns. Obviously this isn't a 3 barn setup, but you know, you could take a 3 barn setup and then use what I've done here today, hopefully, and create that for yourself. So, but you need to do that in the map. You would not be able to create this as a separate mod because it's running on the Fabrik script. You would not be able to have say these 3 here, the grass, the straw and the pig food, all together in one mod, because it would share the same inputs and outputs. So what would basically happen, you would have to put each one of these in before it would work, and then you would, on your outputs, you'd have really weird things happening with your outputs. So you can only set this kind of function up within a map. You cannot do it as a separate mod, or at least I would suggest you couldn't. I don't see how you would be able to. Anyway, there we go. I'm going to stop now. So thanks very much for watching. Hopefully this was some help and you've learned something here. If you haven't, maybe it was just entertaining. I don't know. But thanks very much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.